All right. Welcome back to everyone joining us. Let's talk about some news and notes, not just in NWSL, but across the globe as well. Let's start there. Of course, we are about 70 plus days, let's say about 77 or so
Crazy.
from the World Cup. Yes, it's wild to think about. But President Gianni Infantino making some threats in the name of the women's game. FIFA, the headline is that FIFA threatens the Women's World Cup TV blackout in Europe specifically. Said that matches would not be shown in the continent's biggest markets this summer unless the broadcasters meet FIFA's demands for higher fees. So, sounds like he's trying to get as much out of the broadcast deals as possible, which, hey,
I don't blame
respect.
him. I
I
don't
don't
blame
blame
him.
him, right?
By any
The
means.
biggest stage, the biggest tournament in the world. Um, and yet we think it's a little extra. It's a little much.
Yeah, it's definitely dramatic. I mean, what is this? He also basically what happened was that President Gianni Infantino came out and he had this statement that said that it is our moral and legal obligation not to undersell the FIFA Women's World Cup. Therefore, should the offers continue not to be fair, we'll be forced not to broadcast the FIFA Women's World Cup into the big five European countries. So that would be Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and of course England, all with teams in the tournament. But he wasn't happy with the figures that came through and the offers that happened. He called it a slap in the face, not just to the World Cup players,
He
but
was
Sandra, to women in general. He said it was a slap in the face. Um,
thank God
I
all
had
the
to chuckle. I had to chuckle
yeah,
at this.
I'm still chuckling right now. Thank the universe that these wonderful athletes have Gianni Infantino as
Mhm.
their guardian of broadcast rights. I look, it's I appreciate the energy and wanting to ensure that you get what you believe is a good figure for what is going to be arguably one of the best World Cups of our era. But I was also a little bit curious about it too because I unless I'm making this up, and please, if you're in the chat, feel free to help out and stat check me. But I almost feel like BBC has some rights already in play for FIFA World Cup. So I'm like, what is he talking about with England here? I was just a little bit like, I was just like, am I not following something or is he not following something? Is this just part of the pitch? I don't know. But I do hope that this gets settled at a certain point because listen, the some of the countries that he's talking about in the handful there have a pretty good shot at
Yeah.
doing some very special things this World Cup. I think you and we've been doing so much, in terms of the build up to this World Cup, and whenever we cover it, wherever we do a segment on it, we're talking all the time about how we feel like this is going to be one of the best World Cups ever. And a part of that is because of the parity that, especially within those top 10 teams, if you're a top 10 team and you're going up against another top ranked team, it's almost like an any given Sunday type of scenario that any one of those teams to sort of go ahead and take on the other one and kind of deliver a disappointing result, no matter the ranking within them. A four can upset a one, right? Or an eight can upset a two, like et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that when we're talking about France or Spain or Germany, those are some of those teams that have those rankings and that that could maybe make some noise in the World Cup. So hopefully it gets settled out.
Yeah, so basically what the point of it is, I mean, Infantino went out and made statements about the prize money for the World Cup, saying that it was going to be increased this year, increasing the prize money, and pledged that it would be equalized to the Men's World Cup by 2027. And he needs that money to come from the broadcast rights. That's uh, where he's saying he needs it to come from, essentially, because that's where then FIFA is going to get the money. But of course, it does mean a bit more money in FIFA's pockets because
Of
that's
course.
how FIFA works. That's how
Hmm.
the business world works. You know, I'm a little business gal over here. But it's very just interesting kind of how this all came about and the fact that he makes this statement that it's a slap in the face to women. It definitely made me chuckle, but we'll see what happens. We'll kind of see how this plays out. I just don't think that it will not be broadcast in Europe. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's a possibility. I don't think that he has the power to threaten that. Like, that's where I'm confused,
Yeah.
right? Like, why does he have the power to say, oh, this isn't going to be broadcast there? But yeah, he's trying to get more money for it, which, hey, I respect that, because that's how they're going to try to get the equal pay for women by 2027 for the World Cup prize money. But just kind of funny how this came out. We'll see. We'll keep everyone
Yeah.
impressed as
For
to
sure. We
what
wanted to touch
next.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to touch on it. It was one of those headlines that gets people chatting and talking, us included, and we wanted to bring that up on the show. And if you're joining us on YouTube, definitely let us know your thoughts about it all in the chat. But again, mentioning a big handful of European powerhouses in those broadcast rights. England, one of those countries as well. And unfortunately, we have to talk about the Lionesses and a bit of injury news that will affect them moving forward. A recent announcement from Fran Kirby herself, addressing that she is no longer going to be able to compete for the remainder and duration of Chelsea's season, and essentially will miss the World Cup as well, because she is set to undergo surgery after sustaining an injury against West Ham. So she's expected to be out for a significant amount of time. And then Fran Kirby went ahead and made a personalized message across her social medias and essentially confirmed that that significant amount of time will be for the duration of Chelsea's season. And unfortunately, throughout the remainder of the summer, and she will not be able to make the World Cup, and that she's going to continue to root for her teammates at Chelsea and, of course, her Lioness teammates as well. But it just, this injury bug that's going around right now, Lisa, is really harsh. Really, really harsh.
It's just really harsh. I mean, especially with Kirby, this is a player that suffered this injury, right? Like February, like months ago at this point, and now it's just kind of coming out that she won't be available for the rest of the summer. Thoughts and prayers with Fran Kirby. We're wishing a speedy recovery. But now, I think across the board, it's devastating to see all these players getting injuries and injuries. And here we talk a lot about the U.S. women's national team, and there's a number of injuries on that roster and with that team. Most recently, Mallory Swanson, rupturing her patellar tendon. She'll be unavailable for the World Cup. But I think when you look at England, and this is the Euros champions in 2022, and how many injuries they are now dealing with. In addition to Fran Kirby, which we just talked about, Leah Williamson, we have talked about before on this show, out with an ACL injury. Beth Mead is like trying to work her way back, trying to get back into fitness. Not so sure about that one. There is just a number of question marks around all of this. Millie Bright, we don't know kind of what's happening there with Millie Bright. There's just so many injuries, and Fran Kirby just kind of is another one bites the dust in so many, in like the lowest sense of it, to kind of break it all down. It's just like another heartbreaking loss for England and the Lionesses. It stinks. It really stinks, especially for these players and for the World Cup and the competition.
No, I hear you 100%. I think when we're looking at these injuries, and we're looking at them at the caliber of player that these injuries are affecting, I mean, it's almost like, I think for the Lioness side of things, you have to wonder if maybe some of these players that they have lost are players that are possibly irreplaceable, essentially. I think maybe people can maybe make that same argument for Mal Pugh, like, this is a player that's devastating to lose for the United States. But there's also the other side of that coin, where it's like, well, there's actually a lot of depth in the forward core for the U.S. women's national team, and the protocols in place to try to get someone in and have them go ahead and move forward. But I think Kirby is one of those players for me. I just think she's a phenomenal player. I think Williamson was one of those players for me. It was almost a irreplaceable type of player for England. So it'll be interesting to see how how Serena Wigman kind of continues to address these things. I mean, and then the other side of that is there are players who are kind of carrying those knocks. We're talking about how this is an injury that finally said enough to Fran Kirby. This is a player who's sort of been trying to play through it. And then you have maybe someone in Lucy Bronze,
Yes,
who just recently underwent like a scope, so you're talking about just like very,
and Millie
very tight timeline right
who
now for.
hurt herself in March and hasn't been back yet. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Listen, I think Beth Mead, I think Serena Wigman has already said that they're going to be without her. I understand a player's mentality and wanting to try to work their way back, but it sounds like the Lionesses are preparing to move forward
I mean,
without
now
her
do
in
you
the
think
summer.
that changes for Wigman, Beth Mead, now knowing that Fran Kirby is out?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think maybe it's just kind of a wait and see approach. I know that Rachel Daly is someone who's typically played, um, she's played on the forward line for club in her entire career, but when it comes to the national team, she's played on the back line. But I don't anticipate that changing either. I would imagine that you don't want to disrupt what you've got going on in
I know.
your defensive shape to address some things higher up the pitch. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on and pay attention to and sort of see the different type of game scenarios that Wigman is trying to evaluate right now and try to compensate for some of the loss of these players and keep an eye on some of those players who have had some minor knocks and maybe sort of gauge their availability closer to the World Cup, whether it's bronze or Millie Bright, etc. So tough news to see. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Fran Kirby. I love her playing the pitch. Gutted to think of her not being available for the World Cup. So best wishes for sure to Kirby and her recovery. And you know what? Let's close out with maybe some sports transactions. Let's talk about trades. Let's talk about windows. Let's talk about player movement because we had a little bit of that over the course of the last week in NWSL because the trade deadline has come and gone. It's passed. I believe it was last week on a Thursday. So maybe there were some things that got over the line and just haven't quite been announced just yet. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the trade for Victoria Pickett, moving from Gotham FC to North Carolina Courage. My goodness. I mean, could we see Victoria Pickett in a Challenge Cup game as soon as tonight as we're talking about this? I don't know. We'll see. TBD. Stay tuned. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw this trade go through, I thought it was a great pickup for North Carolina Courage, and I thought it was a real head scratcher for me,
Yeah.
for Gotham FC because I just am kind of like they gave a lot. Gotham FC made a lot to basically get Victoria Pickett initially from Kansas City Current, and so now here we are
And
about
they
less.
signed her to a 3-year deal with
And
a
then
4-year option in December of 22. So just at the start of this 2023 regular season, Gotham made a contract for Victoria Pickett for the long term, saying you're going to be part of our 3-year plan coming into it. And now we're both just like scratching our heads. Hey, I don't actually know why.
I
I mean,
don't know. Yeah.
massive pickup for North Carolina, but
I know how I could see on how this makes total sense for North Carolina.
yep.
Like 100%. And yet you look at the Gotham side of things and you're just like, so essentially you lost a first round draft pick in the 2023 draft because when they made this initial deal with the Current, it was for $200,000 in allocation money and a first round draft pick in 2023. And so now they're going the other way with North Carolina Courage and maybe getting some of that allocation money back, but that draft is done and dusted and gone. So I'm with you. Like looking at all of it on paper from the move prior to it as well. That's why it's a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, and $200,000 is a lot. I think it's worth it for North Carolina. I don't know, and maybe, right, like, it comes down to player
Maybe,
preference, but she
maybe.
sounded kinda surprised that it
I
happened.
mean,
I
I
don't
don't
know,
know if you
I don't know, just
I
me.
mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that. You're kind of like, I don't know. I'm like, look, I don't know if you sign a multi-year deal with a team that just traded for you the season prior and then not be surprised that you're traded midseason.
Totally, that's a lot to move, whatever. I mean, best of luck to Victoria Pickett. I'm actually super excited for her and her impact at North Carolina because they
Yeah.
need a little bit of that Pickett sauce in the midfield. I
Yeah.
think she can provide a lot for them. I think it's a really good pickup for Sean Nahas. And this might hurt Gotham a little bit moving forward. We're kind of see what they do with it because they've been getting into a groove. But hey, we'll see. Maybe we'll get a glimpse of Pickett tonight in the Challenge Cup for North Carolina. We'll see.
I'll be tuning in for sure. But that's a wrap for us here at Attacking Third. Of course, we're going to pay attention to see if more signings get announced or trades get announced along the way. So make sure you stay tuned.